Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News. Today, welcome back one of our regular guests, Brian from Santiment Data Analytics. So, how's things, Brian?
Good to see you, Alex. Things are good. Markets are, at least for the moment, looking a little more up than they have for a while. It's been a roller coaster, so we've got plenty to talk about.
Yeah, it feels like we've reached a bit of an extreme in sentiment with the negativity and a bit of fear, and even people talking about, oh, was that the top? Is this cycle over? So today we're going to be diving into what's happening on chain, what are all the whales doing, and what's all the sentiment analysis that they do over at Sentiment telling us. So, what are your just general thoughts, Brian? What have you been noticing before we get into the data?
Yeah, the end of 2024 was kind of being driven by um, a lot of bullish narratives out there, speculation for what was to come, especially in the US. And as, Trump's official election process happened and his inauguration happened about a month and a half ago, things have turned very much macroeconomic with markets. There's still a big tie toward what's going on with world markets right now and how that's impacting crypto prices. And, it seems as though as long as world markets are looking okay, crypto can thrive. But the moment we start to see retracing, crypto gets kind of pulled down along with it because there's so much overlap with the institutional traders having their hands in both these days.
Yeah, and that's what we're seeing with some of our in-house metrics that we watch is that some of the macro stuff is a bit weak, and a lot of people are waiting till the liquidity taps get turned back on, QE or whatever they're going to do. But a lot of our data points around Bitcoin are all still really positive and saying that this cycle isn't over or anything like that. It's just a bit choppy and uncertain for the short term.
Right. Yeah, it's a lot of people have kind of been considering we're in a bull market going all the way back to late 2023. And I think as we've had about 6 to 7 weeks straight of, uh, I guess I'd call it a pretty mid-sized retrace, the narrative around us being in a bull market is no longer there. It's kind of all about who you're talking to and how long their time range is. But
Yes.
for now, it's more of a sideways, very volatile type of condition we're dealing with, and that's causing some heavy emotions, which are driving out a lot of retailers from what we're seeing.
Absolutely. So let's dive into this data of yours. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, let's do it. I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to start by just checking out a quick weekly update. If I can share my screen correctly, it should be working right now, right?
Perfect.
Okay, so this is just showing the past week of price returns. We can see Bitcoin here up about a little over 6%, modest rebound after we were talking right before this call started, Alex. Things were really doom and gloom in that February 24th to 27th range when Bitcoin was dipping down below 80K for the first time in a long time, pretty much since Trump got elected. This was as um, low as we had seen most market caps. And of course, many altcoins are doing a lot worse than what Bitcoin had been doing. So um, this has kind of been a flush of many, many altcoins out there. And the holders' patience kind of ran thin to the point where people jumped out of meme coins out of loss, started to put their money back into Bitcoin, or they just, took it completely out of crypto. And it may sound contradictory, but that's actually a good thing because it means that those small retailers are dumping to the key stakeholders, those whales and sharks that are just saying, all right, thanks for your coins. We'll tuck them away for safekeeping until the next bull rally.
Yeah, and absolutely. That's what we need to see, as you say. We need that healthy people that are up, particularly traders that are up. We need those hands to change and for
Yeah.
the dust to settle before we can have that next leg higher with new money, new narratives and all that type of thing for the next part of the cycle.
Exactly. And a good sign of mid and long term fear from the retail traders is when you see Bitcoin social volume, which is showing here, it's up 18% in the past week compared to the week prior. XRP up huge because it's had a pretty nice ascension, up about 19% the past week, doing a lot better than Bitcoin. And then at the same time, you see meme coins like Dogecoin, less discussion compared to a week ago. Shiba Inu, way less discussion than a week ago. Pepe over here, way less discussion than a week ago. So the meme coins and those speculative assets are kind of you know, objectively, according to the data, getting off of traders' radars, and they're focused more on the relative safe havens like Bitcoin, XRP, Ethereum here in the middle, still being kind of ignored because it's underperformed for so long.
Yeah.
But we might be able to have time to get into that briefly later on the call.
Yeah, and just quickly, how surprised were you to see the strategic reserve with Cardano and XRP and things that a lot of people wouldn't have maybe predicted?
Yeah, it's funny. I think a lot of people were just hoping it would be Bitcoin by itself, and there was almost like a backlash to Ethereum, XRP, and Solana being included in that. Um, but I think people will come around depending on when we start to see crypto get its footing. It's funny when prices have been going down, when we've had bad 24 to 72 hour stretches in crypto, people start looking at Trump's actions as foolish or uh, you know short-sighted, and it's causing all of this chaos. Which, to an extent, that's probably true. But when things go up, there's kind of a dismissal that it has anything to do with the U.S. president and the policies that are being enacted right now. So I think as moods change, especially if we see a rebound for the rest of March and going into April and even the summer, that's when people will look back on these actions now and decide whether they were actually good or bad for crypto long term.
Yeah, and as you say, if we got a straight Bitcoin strategic reserve, then obviously the maxis would be happy. But the fact that we're talking about Ethereum and other altcoins in the top 10, like if you're a holder of any altcoins, it's eventually going to be good for all altcoins, or at least the strong, the quality projects. We know not everything is going to go up, but that's the way I'm viewing it. So even if you don't love XRP or Sol or Cardano, it's probably a good thing for all altcoins in all the crypto space.
Exactly. And just to, on a related note to that, we put out this poll a little under 24 hours ago, um, mentioning how markets have rebounded. And we talked about the current price levels at the time of that poll. Things are just slightly under this right now. But we said, which of these assets will hit their respective milestone next? Bitcoin going to 110K, which would be the first time it does that. Ethereum back above 3K, or XRP back above $3. And then, of course, for the doomers and gloomers out there, we included the option none will happen. And sure enough, none will happen is not last place. Ethereum going to 3,000 seems to be the one that nobody or very few people seem to believe, followed by none will happen. Over 1 out of 5 people believe none of these options will ever happen again, assuming they understand the language right in the poll, which I think I put out correctly. But yeah, I mean, not surprising to see Bitcoin's all-time high being the most likely in traders' eyes, but I'm shocked to see this level of bearish, where more than 1 out of 5 people believe we're never going to see another all-time high for Bitcoin or Ethereum above 3,000 or XRP above $3 again. So interesting there.
That is good to see. If indeed, that's kind of what we need, some bearish sentiment to get that next leg higher. So
yeah.
What's up next for us, Brian?
Exactly. So on that sentiment note, this is a fun little chart that shows the long-term predictions of traders. So we've been in this range of anywhere between roughly 78K to about, what was this high? About, call it 105-ish or so, right? Or I'm sorry, this was the all-time high, so it went all the way to 109. But you can see in these blue bars, all dimensions of 50K up to 69K Bitcoin prices. So obviously when these spike, it's usually a signal of fear and people mentioning their targets of when they want to buy back in when it goes that low. Same thing up here when it goes 100 all the way up to 119. This is when people are predicting prices that we have not yet seen, or we have seen 100 all the way to 109, but you get the idea. Higher prices for the most part than what we usually are in this lasting range. And generally, you're going to be seeing a lot of red at the very tops and blues at the very bottom. And none of this range has been even close to 69K, but a lot of people are predicting 50 to 69K right when we're plummeting. And then all of a sudden they kick themselves for selling off, trying to wait for those low prices, and we proceed to rally. And it's happened 2, 3 times with our latest one happening just 3 days ago.
Yeah, and like you said, we saw things like the funding rate flip negative as so many people were shorting, and a lot of technical things as well, being oversold. So yeah, I think from where we are now, at least we're very close to a short-term bounce.
Exactly. So we, as you said, Alex, we want to continue to see the crowd narrative leaning bearish, even though there's been a bit of a mini rally over the last day and a half. It still shows, at least here in the numbers, that people have been predicting a lot more lower prices than they have high. So that's a good sign. I also wanted to point out a few charts that we had in a biweekly market report that I just published a few hours ago. Of course, we have the overall trading volume, which is here in tan. You can see it getting really high as we were really bottoming out at the end of February, and it's pretty much still high now. Um, and then from a social perspective, the big thing, I'm sure you guys were speaking about it in your neck of the woods, but Zelensky obviously visited the Oval Office here in the U.S. about a week ago, and it was awkward and tension filled, to say the least. So we can see the moment when Zelensky visited here at the end of February. Then we talked about Trump's crypto reserve singular, as prices really started to skyrocket. And this actually ended up causing FOMO and a bunch of people getting super excited when it was still in kind of that speculative time frame. Nothing is solidified yet on it. And then here, the tariffs started to really become the dominant subject as we began to crash, and the crowd started searching for an explanation for why we suddenly went from super excited about the crypto reserve to a big plummet at the beginning of March.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been covering geopolitics more than ever because, the same reason we started covering them together all those years ago, because it's so interrelated, and we're seeing that now with everything that's going on, the tensions in Europe and Russia and whatnot, as well as monetary policy. Ending
Yes.
the IRS and ending the Fed and all this kind of thing. It's all eventually going to tie into crypto, and we're just seeing this corruption being exposed everywhere. And I keep reminding people, decentralized systems, getting back ownership of our data and privacy and so on. This is the way forward ultimately.
Great point. Yeah, and it's funny because obviously I'm here in the US and I've lived here my whole life, but the news cycles in this country do not always directly have the most impact on crypto, but it does seem like since Trump began to get into the news, probably around last summer when his name was consistently being discussed as the future president of the US, um, the US has really had a bigger microscope on it than I've seen in a long time. And it's tough for me to gauge while I'm in here because we're already getting our own country's news thrown at us. But I'm curious, Alex, if you've seen that phenomenon as well, where it's just like every single piece of US news is being beamed out at 10 times the amount of volume as we were seeing maybe 2, 3, 4 years ago.
Yeah, and I agree. But I also think we're living in two worlds. There's people that follow the news cycle, that see what's happening and are watching all this corruption being exposed. And Trump has become the most powerful leader the way he's threatening tariffs. And we've already seen it in a few of his actions with other countries where they said one thing and then backed down. So there's no doubt that I think all sort of Western nations, whether it's Canada, Australia, Greenland, are going to be massively influenced by what
Right.
happens in US politics. And, even I think it was yesterday when Europe starts talking about going to war and whatever, and our Australian leaders come out and start talking about how they stand with Ukraine and, stand with Israel and talking about sending troops. So this is literally the most crazy time we've lived through in our lifetimes.
Exactly. And neither of our channels, Alex, are political channels by any means, but what we can do is report on how the crowd is perceiving the news. And I think a lot of people who've been in crypto for a long time have realized it's not about how you personally believe something is going to play out or whether you believe one country or one individual is right or wrong. It's about how the crowd is reacting. Does the world believe that any Trump news is bullish for crypto, like they did throughout 2024? That was generally the case.
Yeah.
Has that flipped, and now any big Trump news um, is now being perceived as bearish for crypto? Obviously, it depends on the topic, but for now, we have seen a bit of a 180, at least on our own president and how things have been playing out with his name in the news all the time.
Yeah, and we might get some more light shed on all that with this crypto summit as well.
Exactly. I also talked about how Polymarket is showing that 63% of people believe there will be a ceasefire. For what it's worth, more of a political topic, but of course that's going to be very much correlated with crypto prices if there is some sort of ceasefire. So it's something to keep an eye on. This is Trump's tweet about the crypto reserve I mentioned. And then you can even see like how panic sells really kind of set in at the end of February. Huge leg up on the US reserve announcement. And then the FOMOers just get baffled, as they always do, when there are too many of them at the same time, by this sudden pullback that we saw at the beginning of March. So feel free to check it out for those watching. If you want to see the full article, it's at insights.santiment.net. But some other current charts that I prepared, Alex, this is, I wouldn't call it encouraging, but a kind of a fascinating flip. You can see how much sentiment was really down in the dumps as we were bottoming out and crypto got below 79K to that low 78K range, and how just about 24 to 48 hours ago, we're suddenly seeing the most bullishness we've seen in about 3 weeks when we were teasing 100K again.
Yeah, definitely interesting there with the sentiment bottoming, slightly before price bottoms there.
Yeah, and for those who were wondering how this is calculated, we're simply taking all of the social media mentions on X, Reddit, Telegram, 4chan, Bitcoin Talk, Farcaster, and we're dividing any comment that can be attributed as positive versus any comment attributed as negative, and literally just creating a ratio. So when there's way more positive than negative, that's when you see these high FOMO bars. When you see very more negative comments, or at least about the same amount of negative comments, because social media always skews a bit bullish, that's when you tend to see these low ones. And you shouldn't be surprised to see tops when people are overly positive and bottoms when people are overly negative, because markets move the opposite direction of the crowd's expectations.
Fantastic. What about I'll let you go through, Brian, but I think, what's happening on chain with the whales is definitely something people are excited to
know. This is my last Bitcoin topic, and then maybe we spend the final moments talking about a few altcoins here. But just to give an update on the wallets holding 10 or more Bitcoin, which very clearly has shown a good correlation with where prices tend to move next from a long-term perspective. They were accumulating pretty consistently from the start of the bull rally, which one could argue happened way back in September or at least mid-October here, when they really started to take off and get confident that Trump was going to win the election. So between October 12th and February 19th, roughly little over 4 months, they accumulated about 157,000 Bitcoin during this time. And then suddenly, February 19th until March 3rd, they dumped about 11,331 Bitcoin back to retailers. And that wasn't a good sign. And it resulted at the most at about a 15% loss just during that week between the 19th and 26th. But we're at least starting to see a little bit of a buyback now the last couple of days, where they've added about 2440 Bitcoin back into their stacks. Long story short, they finally started to show a bit of dumping sign, and this was very concerning. But at least over the last couple of days, they put that on pause and are starting to show signs of buying back. So long term still looks great. And even during this dumping period, I mean, it's small flash in the pan compared to the huge collection of coins they had throughout that 4-month stretch.
Fantastic. And I think, yeah, people at home be eager to see something similar happening on ETH, or are the whales still just selling there? And you said you've also got some data on XRP, because I really think, it's kind of those three that need to turn for everything else to have the opportunity to go green.
Yeah, let's take a look at ETH first. So from Ethereum's perspective, I'm going to adjust these ranges a bit because 10 or more Ethereum is not nearly the amount of capital as 10 or more Bitcoin. So let's look more toward something in the range of about 1,000 or more, which still might arguably be a bit small. But we're just going to look at the overall amount of coins held. And people are going to watch this and say, yes, that's including, exchange wallets, DeFi, staking. Makes it a little bit tougher to gauge how many active whales are really accumulating or dumping at any given time, but it still gives us somewhat of an idea. And I can back this up quite a ways. Take Bitcoin off here, or the old line. So looking at the past year, it's looked pretty good. I mean, while everyone is really poo-pooing on Ethereum right now, the 1,000 or more wallets have quietly just continued to collect more and more of the supply. They've added about 2.9% of all Ethereum over the past year on top of what they already have. So 1,000 or more Ethereum wallets currently sit at about 84.85% of all of the supply, and they were just a little under 82% a year ago. So they're moving in the right direction.
That is good to see, and it kind of ties in with how this cycle hasn't really been about retail entering, and we're not getting a large amount of small wallet holders, new addresses holding ETH. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah, and on that point, we can actually look at how many new wallets are popping up. Generally, there's always going to be more and more growth over time, but you can see moments where they really spiked. January 24th, a lot of big altcoins especially saw huge jumps in network growth right as Trump was elected. Perhaps there were some optimistic folks out there who believed that those top caps may benefit the most from a pro-crypto presidency. But it seems as though network growth is moving in the right direction compared to last summer. It's looking pretty good, and we're seeing I'm seeing anywhere between 110 to 120,000 new wallets popping up every single day for Ethereum.
That's positive news as well. So what about XRP, Brian? I know we covered last week on the show the Fed put out a new paper about Byzantine fault tolerance and protocols that use that, like XRP, Stellar, and that sort of thing. And so, yeah, I think I said in the pre-interview, as someone that was never bullish on XRP for 10 years, I think there are signs now that maybe some of these financial institutions are maybe going to use it for some form of payment, with Trump talking about ending the Fed and ending the IRS and all this corruption we've seen by the big banks. Maybe there is a case for an entirely new system.
Right. And I'm seeing a huge spike in address activity that coincided with that announcement. So it's undoubtedly correlated in some way, but just take a look at active addresses here that I'm highlighting. Just through the moon all of a sudden in March. If I just put like a 7-day correlation on that, that's what this little line is. So currently we're seeing about 337,000 daily active addresses firing off on the network or the XRP ledger every single day, versus just about 2 weeks ago, we were seeing more like 46K. So just absolutely like, what's that, like an 8x level of address activity compared to normal. So the network is going through the roof right now. And it doesn't necessarily mean we're bound to see a huge bullish candle. But if we compare it to the recent past, the last time we saw huge address activity spikes was very beginning of December, and we saw what happened there. Just massive green candles, specifically for XRP compared to the rest of the markets. So I'd call that a good sign.
Yeah, and like I said, I think if a lot of this stuff is going on, it's going to be with under NDAs behind closed doors with
Of
people
course.
higher up. And one thing you would want to see is exactly this, huge spikes in activity on the network without any specific announcement or anything yet. So again, I don't have a huge position in XRP. Bitcoin is still my main position. But I think it's super interesting what's happening.
Yeah, and one thing to keep an eye on, obviously, it's still a zero-sum game, no matter which coin you're looking at. And for XRP, we do see that the average wallets are slightly in profit for wallets that have been active in the past 30 days. If you look at the right side of my screen while I'm highlighting it, it's showing that average wallets are up about 3.5%. But if you look at the long term, it's off the axis. I don't think it's important to adjust the axis. You get the idea. Just looking at that right number in teal, cyan, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
up 56%. That's the average return of any wallet that's been active in the past year, uh, with at least one transfer, basically. So that's a bit of a concern. We would
Yeah.
still like to see this come down a little bit more for the long term. It doesn't mean that what's going on right now with XRP isn't good news, but generally the best times to buy into an asset are, when you see both the short and long-term returns well into the negative. I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people wish they could have bought in when XRP was sitting at 50, 53 cents like they were last October.
Yeah.
But regardless, I mean, just keep in mind there is some risk due to your fellow peers being heavily in profit already.
Fantastic. Anything else before we wrap up, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, the last thing is on Solana, not to ignore the last of our big four here. I can say from a sentiment perspective, there has been a big increase in shorting going on. And it's worth pointing out that it kind of started as the prices were falling, following Trump being inaugurated. And it's still continuing now. In fact, it looks like it's picking up a bit steam, just eyeballing the size of those red spikes there. So this just means there's a greater amount of shorts compared to longs happening on Binance, the largest exchange in the world currently. And if these shorts get liquidated by perhaps a crypto-wide downturn, that would essentially act as rocket fuel for Solana's price to really start to make up some ground. It's a bit of a gamble right now, but I do want to point out that the sentiment has veered negative for the fourth largest non-stable coin out there.
Fantastic. Well, I'll stop that screen share, Brian. There we go. Perfect. So, yeah, appreciate all that. Guys, all the links to follow Santiment, Brian on Twitter, and sign up for their premium research if you like that are always down below. But any final thoughts today, Brian, for the audience?
Yeah, I mean, obviously expect volatility to continue. Trump and Musk news is really generating uh, all of these ebbs and flows at the moment, and we don't see that stopping anytime soon. So be safe out there and understand that, support and resistance levels, things like that can help, but we're all kind of at the mercy of what's happening from a global economic perspective right now. So be safe.
Absolutely. Well, I hope you guys have enjoyed that. Smash that like button, and we will get Brian back on again in future. Thanks for your time, Brian.
Thanks, Alex.